Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has obsessed over immortality, from the Knights of the Round Table searching for the Holy Grail, to the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh looks for the plant of eternity. I don't know why it is this idea is so rooted in human consciousness. Maybe it's because of the fear people have of death, or maybe it's because we all secretly desire to be like the gods. Whatever the case, there is at least one circumstance where a man lived for a very long time. His name was Ammon, and this is his story. It begins, at least in some accounts, in ancient Mesopotamia. Now, the man himself, or the boy at this point, was called Ammon, and he lived with his family, his 6 brothers and his 6 sisters, with his mother, Nahira, and his father, whose name has been lost to the records. Anyways, they worked on the farm for long hours, and there really wasn't much to say about Amon because, to be honest, he seemed to be most of the time simply there. He didn't seem to really feel much emotion at all. He never seemed to feel love or hate or jealousy. He just did the work, and that was really all there was to him. However, one time, him and his brother were going out into the desert, and they were overturning rocks, and they were looking underneath them. And at one point Ammon pulled open one rock to reveal a venomous snake, and the snake came slithering up, and it should have bit Ammon. It looked just as if it was just ready to bite him, but suddenly it turned, and it bit the brother. And the brother was taken home, and the brother ended up dying. Well, no one really thought much of this occurrence, but his mothers believed, for certain, that Ammon was meant to die in that desert that day, and that somehow he had escaped death. Well, anyways, for many years, no one really knew what to make of the mother or the son and didn't really think anything of them, just thought it was just a weird occurrence. But as the rest of the family began to get older and began to grow gray hairs, Ammon surprisingly seemed to stay the same age, until all of his brothers and sisters were dead and his mother and father, but he was just as young and as sprightly as he had been from the moment he was about 14. Anyway, soon everyone was beginning to question what was going on, and eventually Ammon had to leave in fear of his life, or at least he would have feared if he could fear, as he never seemed to be scared of anything that ever occurred to him. Anyways, many of the records are lost, but we do have one occurrence where a tribe of people tried to kill him, an entire army. And the army came running at him. But just as the army was about to approach him and kill him, or get in range enough to shoot him with their bows, a giant tornado appeared and swept them all up. But Ammon was the only one left standing. He managed to survive. And that's kind of what happened to him throughout his life. Whenever there was a disaster, he managed to be the only one to escape. Anyways, eventually he came to a city in Greece, and he lived there for some time under the name of Theseus. Now, the people there ended up fearing him as much as the people in his own village had. They tried to kill him with bows and swords, but pretty much all the time, whatever happened, he would manage to escape it. Until finally people didn't know what to do with him and put him in a tower with bars at the windows and some books to read. And anyways, the people in some ways saw him as something divine more than the other people in his own village that saw him as cursed. And they would come up and ask him things, and he would answer them and give them advice and give them wise words. And he didn't seem to do it out of kindness or anything like that. He just did it because he did it, and that was all there really was to it. Well, anyways, one day a great flood came into the city. And the flood began to sweep everyone away, and the people all came and they crowded towards the tower, and they began to beg Theseus for help. They asked him to talk to the gods to appease him and make sure the storm stopped. But Theseus just shook his head and continued reading his books and said that he could do nothing for them. Well, anyways, they said, "But you have lived for so many years, thousands, and if you could just help us this one time, think about it. There are children here. You must save us. You must help us escape death, please," they cried as they reached their hands through the bars. But Theseus just shook his head and said, "There is nothing that I can do for you. You are going to die, and I am going to live, and that is all there is to it." Well, anyways, they continued to beg him, but the storm came and the flood occurred, and everyone else died, all of the children and the families. But Theseus managed to survive. He got on a wooden door and managed to be swept away from the storm. Well, anyways, after that, he went through quite a lot, to be honest. Hundreds of years, about 800 years of time, and he saw all sorts of different things, from civilizations falling and risings, to fighting in wars, killing people himself, and he killed quite a few people in his time, I won't lie, but he never really did it out of cruelty or really ever out of love. He just did it because he was part of the war and it was for survival. But anyways, eventually he gained quite a lot of money and he became very rich. And although he was a foreigner, and those times foreigners weren't welcomed, he was probably one of the few rich foreigners that managed to not be attacked by the people. Anyways, people would actually come from miles around to see him and to dine with them and to have a great feast. And eventually a woman fell in love with him, a woman by the name of Rosalind, who was taken by him. She was curious about him and tried to figure out what exactly he was, and eventually she did find out that he was some sort of immortal. And he would tell her stories of time past, of things that no people will ever know about. And she would listen to him, and she was very much obsessed with him, and very much disappointed that he never seemed to feel the same way about her. But eventually it became certain that things were not going to have a happy ending, as she began to grow gray hair, and she laid on her deathbed. And she took his hands and she asked him, "My dear friend, there must be somewhere out there that people like you can go, somewhere where the divine is in the human world. You must find this magic of the world. Do it for me. I would like you to have someone to be with." And anyway, she grabbed hold of his hand and made him promise that he would look for the magic in the world. And he agreed. He said that he would, and she died. Well, anyways, many more years, hundreds of years passed, and he did indeed stay true to his promise to Rosalind. He went searching the world for any kind of magic that he could find. But as I've said before here at the Fireside Tales, you aren't going to find magic unless you know the right places to look for it, and he did not. So he spent hundreds of years in vain until finally one day he was in Mexico at the a festival of the dead. And anyways, everyone is out there partying in the streets, and they were in masks, skull masks, and dancing around and putting flowers and things in front of the graves. And anyways, finally he was walking down the street when he saw a man staring at him. And the man was dressed up like a crow with a beak, and he was sitting there and he was turning some cards in his hands. And finally he walked up to the man, and the man said, "Greetings, I am the master. Amon, that's your name, or is it Mortimer now, or Theseus? I'm not quite sure. Anyways, I have heard stories about you." Anyways, Amon was rather taken aback, well, his name was Mortimer at this point. Mortimer was rather taken aback. He'd never heard someone speak so boldly to him. And he asked him what he was, and the master said, "Why, I'm a creature like you, and there are many more people like you in this world who have lived as long as you have. Come with me and I will take you to them, and I will explain exactly what you are and your origins. You will know everything." Anyways, Mortimer was uncertain. Should he really follow this man? He didn't really know him, but finally he realized he had no choice. He wanted to understand everything. So he followed the master, and the master took him to this temple, and he opened the doors, and he walked in, and all around him was a bunch of people in like masks, skull mask and bird mask, and just dressed up like they were at the festival of the dead, and they were all dancing around, and there were even some people that weren't in masks dancing around. And finally, the master stood up on the table, and suddenly Mortimer realized that everyone was surrounding him. And then the man laughed. "Ha ha ha! Thousands of years and I finally managed to capture you. I managed to capture you, Amon. Take off your mask, my friends. These are the servants of death, and I am the Grim Reaper." Anyways, all the people took off their masks to reveal they were indeed the servants of death. And the master was in fact the Grim Reaper himself. "Yes, I have hunted you all these years, but you always managed to escape me. Circumstance managed to allow you to live. I think it was a trick of the man in grey, although I cannot be certain." Anyways, the master grabbed hold of Mortimer, and Mortimer seemed frightened, but the Grim Reaper said, Oh, come now, my friend, don't be afraid. You have lived hundreds of years now, and you have had a good life. And there are people waiting for you, Rosalind and many others, and there are many more stories for you to be had in the next life. But for now you must leave this one. Anyways, Mortimer realized that he had finally been caught by the man that had been trying to capture him all this time. And he asked, really, how it was that he did manage to capture him. And the Grim Reaper smiled. It was quite simple. When you made that promise long ago, you began to gain a soul. Slowly but surely you began to gain a perception of reality. And with this perception of reality, I was finally able to capture you once and for all. But come now, my friend. It is time for you to leave this world. They are waiting for you. Anyways, Mortimer was indeed taken to the next world, and so passed the longest man to ever live in this world. That old Grim Reaper is a clever fellow, isn't he? And he always manages to capture his prey in the end. But let it be remembered that the Grim Reaper is neither really good or evil. He simply is, just sort of as Mortimer was. And this story shows you just how hard it is to cheat death, for it's one thing to live a very long time, but living forever, well, that's where things get difficult. But that is all the time that I have for you tonight. As always, sweet dreams, and good night.
Like, share, and subscribe for more.